Greetings and welcome to the United States Transhumanist Party Virtual Enlightenment Salon. My name is Gennady Stolyarov II, and I am the chairman of the US Transhumanist Party. Here we hold conversations with some of the world's leading thinkers in longevity, science, technology, philosophy, and politics. Like the philosophers of the Age of Enlightenment, we aim to connect every field of human endeavor and arrive at new insights to achieve longer lives, greater rationality, and the progress of our civilization. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our U.S. Transhumanist Party Virtual Enlightenment Salon of July 16th, 2023. Today we will have a fascinating conversation in store for you about Gnosticism and transhumanism and perceptions of transhumanism within the Gnostic community and how they compare to what we transhumanists know about the transhumanist movement and its aspirations. So joining us today, we have our distinguished panel of U.S. Transhumanist Party officers and candidates, our Director of Visual Art, Art Ramon Garcia, our Director of Applied Innovation, David Shoemaker, our Director of Sentient Rights Advocacy and 2024 U.S. presidential candidate, Tom Ross, and our 2024 U.S. vice presidential candidate, Daniel Tweed. And our special guest for today is Miguel Conner. Miguel Conner describes himself as a garage philosopher, hedge theologian, and general madman across the waters. His life quest is to take his audience from ancient connections to modern meaning. He is the host of Aeon Byte Gnostic Radio, author of 4 published books, and writer of hundreds of articles in various publications. So, first of all, we would like to welcome Miguel, and before we let Miguel have his introductory remarks, Tom Ross would like to say a few words as well.
Yeah, thanks. When I first started as an officer, I suggested that we engage with those who see transhumanism as having a dark agenda. Now, I've appeared on many podcasts and radio shows where I managed to actually change the minds of at least the hosts. And a major part of my political campaign is to seize back the transhumanist narrative, which has gotten away from us, and how. In many ways, this is less political campaign and more of a marketing campaign for transhumanism. Now, as a Gnostic myself, I've been a fan of Miguel's for years. Now, he came on to a series I did with WTEF about my book US6 called The Gnostic Simulation Hypothesis. And that was a great show. It was a great conversation. And so when I saw that he had a recent episode called Transhumanism, AI, and Demonic CERN, although this episode was really driven by one of his guests, I wanted to invite him here to discuss his views on transhumanism, because I see more parallels than the divergence between these two philosophies. And so I'm really glad he agreed to come on the show. This is going to be a great conversation. And, within Gnosticism, there's a profound emphasis on the existence of a divine spark in each individual. With transhumanism, it speculates the possibility of a digital artificial consciousness. So we can get into all that stuff, but I'm really glad he's here. This is going to be a very fascinating conversation. And so let's get started.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Tom. And Miguel, please let us know a bit about yourself. Your description is quite interesting. So what does it mean to be a garage philosopher, hedge theologian, and madman across the waters? And could you tell us a bit about Gnosticism and what you think some prevailing perceptions of transhumanism are within the Gnostic community?
Yeah, first of all, thanks for having me on. Thanks for the invitation, Tom. I would, first I must say I don't speak for the Gnostic community. I can only speak for all the years I've been studying and experiencing Gnostic thought. Whatever I don't even know if there is a Gnostic community. It's so anarchist. And that hasn't changed for 2,000-3,000 years. But I'm not sure how familiar your audience is with Gnosticism. It can be taken as a theology, as an aesthetic, as a philosophy, or all of the above. It can be taken literally. Again, that's up to the person. So, but it basically, for a good understanding, again, I would be especially dealing with transhumanism. I will be leaning or would like to lean on the works of Philip K. Dick. He's obviously not only one of the most influential writers of our times, but his predictions and philosophies have certainly soaked into modern culture. His prophecies, both as a dystopia and technology, have come true, and he really sort of gets what the zeitgeist is today. As I often say, we live in a Philip K. Dick world. I took that from a quote from Michael Moorcock. And Philip K. Dick was extremely influenced by Gnostic thought. He had several Gnostic revelations, mystical experiences. So, having said that, too, I would tell your audience that one of the greatest Gnostic gospels of our modern times is the Matrix. The Matrix is a excellent modern Gnostic gospel. As I said, it's probably the most powerful or influential myth of our times, regardless of what you think of the movie. Certainly the subpar sequels. So that gives us a good baseline of Gnosticism as an ancient view of inner knowing, in which posits that each of us has a shard of infinity or consciousness that has been trapped not in an illusion, but a simulated reality. It's not a false world, it's a faked world. It's been created or coded to keep part of us here, either trapped or as some sort of learning center, as some of the more you might say positive leaning Gnostics would say, like the Hermeticists. And we are all asleep in this false world, or this faked world, sorry, and sometimes literally being fed upon by these higher beings called the archons, headed by a being called the demiurge. And through the interaction or piercing of higher forms of intelligence or consciousness, which the Gnostics call the Gnostic revealers, sending this code. Philip K. Dick would call it Veilus. In the Matrix, you would call it Morpheus. We can be reminded or tapped on the shoulder of our original forms, our original home, and wake up via this special information, which the Gnostics call gnosis. We could wake up to our true form, and through various rituals, we got to expand our consciousness and take these journeys up beyond the faked reality, the simulation, to make contact with what many Gnostics call the alien God, the supreme form of intelligence, the monad of Plato, whatever you want to call it. And we can become fulfilled and whole like Neo in the Matrix, and help others wake up to pierce this veil of illusion, or as Philip K. Dick called it, the black iron prison. That's pretty much an elevator pitch of what is Gnosticism. There's so much more, obviously. If you have questions about this, please let me know. But I would say, from a modern stance, I would agree with Philip K. Dick that transhumanism, as we see it right now, is a negative thing. And I can go into that if you want, or if you have any questions right now.
This is interesting. Thank you for the overview, Miguel. And it does seem like Gnosticism is inspired to a great extent by Platonism. Plato had this allegory of the cave, the idea that there is a higher reality, a world of forms that most people are essentially ignorant of, and one essentially can attain special wisdom in essence by going outside the cave and perceiving reality as it is, but it's very difficult to convince people who are in the cave to make that journey. So would you say there's a strong connection there in terms of a philosophical thread?
Yeah, you definitely hit it on the nail. I would also bring in the myth of Prometheus too. But yeah, I've often said, yeah, that's the original. The OG Matrix would be Plato's cave. So you have that, and then you have the Gnostic idea of a simulation. And then the West suddenly discards that. It just, all these Western religion and philosophies just think, oh, this is the world, this is a material world. And the Gnostics get persecuted and taken off the board. Then comes, of all people, Descartes, because what most people don't know is when he's talking about his famous dictum, cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am, he is speculating on the nature of reality, and he's thinking, well, what if I'm trapped by this demon? And it's called Descartes' demon. And he's created the whole reality around me. And I don't know what's real or not. I'm trapped in the simulation by a demon. So I have to start with I think, therefore I am. And then through a process of scientific inquiry, I can break down and see if it's a simulation or not. So the idea of the simulation theory gets thrown around, and then in the 20th century, with the advent of quantum physics, simulation theory, ufology, and so much more, suddenly Gnostic thought has become much more relevant or important. Again, with the ideas of Philip K. Dick, simulation, the idea of UFOs. I mean, there's something, as many scholars have said, including Eric Davis, there's a sci-fi sensibility about Gnosticism. Some have said the Gnostics were history's first UFO cult. Some have actually made a good point, saying that movements like Scientology or Heaven's Gate are Gnostic. And they are. They definitely have Gnostic characteristics. So the Gnostic vibe is certainly pretty much pretty relevant today, I would say. And it certainly is borne fruit by such popular expressions as Blade Runner, Westworld, so many other movies and art forms that really have this sort of Gnostic vibe. I think the latest one I've seen is there was an Apple TV show called Silo, and that certainly has strong Gnostic vibes.
Very interesting. Thank you. And I do think it's worthwhile to spend a bit of time exploring Gnosticism and how Gnosticism manifests itself, or how it would respond to certain questions, as a way of setting the stage for a discussion of how Gnostics would address transhumanism. So one question that we have is from Daniel Tweed, who wonders, is it necessary to ascribe malevolent intentions to the so-called fake reality? He wonders, perhaps the unfiltered version would be damaging or even fatal. And I suppose the popular expression for that is, you can't handle the truth. So what would a Gnostic say in that regard?
Well, they certainly argued a lot about the nature of reality, whether it was malevolent or benign. Again, some Gnostics were in the camp of Neo. No, this is a terrible place. We're better than this. We are higher than the gods. The coder is insane, or as Philip K. Dick called him, the dangerous magician. And there is no negotiating with the simulation. We got to break it down. Everybody's got to wake up. We are at war. Others, like the Valentinians or the Hermeticists, were a lot softer. They were like, the mind of God just sort of forgot or decided it wanted to experience itself. So it created this video game and these avatars to learn how different experiences would feel like. And then it either forgot or it suspended disbelief for a little bit. It's temporal. Everything's going to be okay. And everything, eventually the video game will end and we will go to our higher self. So there were definitely, there were spectrums. I mean, if anything, Gnosticism, again, coming from the Hellenistic and Egyptian mystic traditions, speculation was certainly open. Disagreement was open, and everything was on the table, except, again, we do live in a simulation. We have a shard of infinity that is higher than anything in this world, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes.
I tend to believe that too. I think, that the Gnosticism, the demiurge, this is just the gameplay. I tend to believe this is a obstacle course for higher consciousness. And so, but this is the gameplay. You come down here and you choose a side, or you choose love versus fear type of thing. And again, I see it. I don't think after death there will be any judgment of the choices we make. It's just a way to create and gather data for the source, whatever that source is. And that there will be my near-death experience research has really kind of unfolded a lot of this belief in that there's no judgment. It's all choices, and whatever choice we make is just more data for the source. And so again, choosing the villain or choosing the hero is just the gameplay here. Now, that I also have a part of me that thinks that's just a way that the Archon is convincing me that there's no consequences, whatever I choose. So it's a constant struggle in my head. But yeah, I think ultimately I do think that this is all the gameplay, and it's a way to exercise our higher consciousness.
Interesting. Now, we do have some feedback from our audience as well. Ice Crystal writes that they do like the ancestor simulation view, that it is more likely that we are in a simulation of this time period to prepare or educate us for the real world in the future than we are to be actually living in this time. And actually, there have been some transhumanist thinkers who have written about this. Nick Bostrom, for instance, has written about the simulation hypothesis, and he has posited a very similar view that it is more probable than not that we are actually living in a simulation of our world created by future beings. Now, that is not my personal view, but it is interesting that a transhumanist philosopher has also arrived at that. Now, we do have a question from Alan Crowley, who wonders, how does Mr. Conner square the duality in Plato and Manichaeism and Christian dualism of Gnosticism with the modern notions that do not follow that thread? For instance, atheism in general and materialist ideas. So a lot of transhumanists are atheists and materialists, for example. Not all of them, but I am, for instance, and transhumanism definitely accommodates that. It also can accommodate a variety of religious perspectives, but there is this duality that Mr. Crowley points out. So what is Gnosticism's take on it?
Well, first I'd like to say, not just Nick Bostrom, but Elon Musk, of course, has taken his ideas. He said there's only a 1% chance that we live in a real world. Of all people, speaking of a materialist reductionist, Neil deGrasse Tyson, he gives a 50-50 chance that we live in a simulation. So right there, materialism would agree, although I'm not understanding the question. I mean, I would say from my perspective that materialism is pretty much dead. I don't think it even can move on as a form of science. I don't know if that's the discussion that's salient today, but let me know. I mean, obviously Gnosticism has been put, I think rightly so, in the category of a mind religion, very much like the Eastern religions, like some forms of Shaivism, Advaita Vedanta, Hermeticism, because it really does posit that all is really sort of a mind energy, and much of what matter is simply a misfire in perception, if you would. So it does lean much more towards idealism. So Gnosticism would certainly reject materialism as it is today.
Yes, interesting. And I definitely do see the difference. So a materialist would perceive the physical world as primary and the mind as emerging from that. So my view is a kind of materialist emergentism, where I do think the mind is real, consciousness is real, free will is real. They are emergent properties of the physical. They're essentially very complex and specific configurations of physical matter that relate to one another in certain ways. And that gives rise to phenomena that wouldn't be characteristic of the individual parts, whereas a Gnostic or an idealist more generally would see the material world as an outcome of ideas or as generated by a mind or minds. Now, it's interesting, too, to consider what are the prerequisites of consciousness and how Gnosticism would address those. So Alan Crowley, first of all, he compliments me for my comment, and then he also wonders, what are Mr. Conner's thoughts on the transfer of psyche to a machine substrate? How does that relate us getting to a higher level of gnosis? So is it possible, in the view of Gnostics, for the human mind to take on a different substrate, perhaps through some incremental transfer? And could that be a way of perhaps increasing our mental abilities or increasing our wisdom and discernment to help us understand the true nature of reality?
No, I would say probably not. I mean, how do I put this? The problem I think we're having is that a lot of individuals, another aspect of Gnosticism, is that it's because the Gnostics were tapping into ancient Egyptian mysteries. They were primarily a shamanistic movement. It's all about altered states of mind, leaving your body, going inward, and sort of using this to expand your consciousness. Now, individuals often make the mistake of assuming that the Gnostics were either doing spiritual bypassing or just wanted to sort of leave the world. That's where the Heaven's Gate makes the mistake, because they thought, oh, our bodies will leave the world, we'll jump on this comet. But that's not what Gnosticism is. Gnosticism was always about being more human. To the Gnostics, they were humanists, again, coming from the Hellenistic idea. And they assumed that the problem with humans is that they weren't human enough, that we as humans have an amazing power to heal, to see reality for it is. It's not even something we gain, it's an intrinsic ability that we are born with. Our minds, even when a lot of the Gnostics were describing the ultimate source, they described it as a mind. And if you could contemplate your mind to that higher mind, you could basically unleash a power within you that would make contact with the mind, but you would do incredible things on this world. And again, the Gnostics not only believe that, but the Neoplatonists believe it. Again, the Hermeticists believe it. Certainly people in the East believe it, that all that we have is right here in our mind, because that is where, again, this divine spark, this shard of infinity is it. So there's no need to leave our mind. There's no need to do anything else except, again, use this gnosis. The mind is the most powerful thing in the world. And even if you might want to argue that it's not, the Gnostics always said, look, as Plotinus said, mankind is standing between the god and the beast. As the Hermit has said, we stand between heaven and earth. So we as humans are a very unique species. We have a certain responsibility. We have certain gifts that other animals or life forms do not have: sentience, the ability for abstraction. And we have to use those to the best of our abilities to, you might say, heal the universe. So the Gnostic argument wouldn't be like, well, let's move to this machine or let's enhance this. It would be, we haven't reached our full humanity yet, so why are we wasting our time? There is an issue why civilization has had its issues. I mean, since civilization came to being, humans have had not an obsession, but an interest with transhumanism and robotics. And there's a really good book, and she was a past guest, Adrienne Mayer. She's a professor at Stanford, Gods and Robots. And she talks, since civilization, humans have tried to join in with the machine. And you see that with the Greek warriors who would put nipples on their armor, and the idea of creating basic robotics, the myths, which really show the history behind history of the core collective human psychology. So the stories of Icarus and Daedalus, they show the stories of the Colossus at Rhodes, even in the a lot of stories. For example, Pandora was never really a woman. She was a robot. So the ancient Greeks, and not just Greeks, but you find it in Chinese myth and lore, you have this amazing speculation on how humans and machines and how it can join together, how we can move beyond our bodies and so forth. It's already there. Nothing has changed. And this is a conversation that I believe should be had, honestly. Whether you think it's negative or not, we human beings are going to be doing that. We have been doing that for thousands of years. The question, are we at the point where we can do it? I would say no, because again, we have not reached our full humanity. We didn't listen to the Gnostics or the Hellenistic philosophers or others. The idea of the amazing potential that is the human mind. I mean, again, I think materialism is dead. Idea of near-death experiences, telepathy, the mind healing with neuroplasticity. It's all there for us to grasp. But here's the problem, and I'm sorry if it's a little long-winded. The problem is that we went from a spiritual technology from the ancient times where the shaman would put on the mask and do all these rituals to go to the spirit world to this thing called civilization, the city, and so forth, where the technology became more material. Again, humans trying to join with machine, humans trying to become one with their tools. But we haven't solved the problem that civilization has had for 5,000 years or 10,000 years, is that one, civilization, the roads and the cities and all that, always has to sacrifice nature at the altar to survive. And when you sacrifice nature, you always sacrifice women because women are connected to nature. And again, we've seen that for 5,000 years or more with the soul. We have with these phallic civilizations, one after the other. The other one is that for civilization to exist, you always have to have slavery. That's just a fact about civilization. And we haven't solved that and even solved it. And even today, we have slavery, whether it's people in Malaysia building our phones or people working for slave wages at some factory. We have a problem with nature. We have other problems. And what's happening is that the experiment is creating this decay that we have. Western civilization is collapsing. Its psyche is collapsing. All the warnings that the Gnostics and Philip K. Dick and the Matrix talked about, which is a mental problem, an emotional problem, is happening today in civilization, and we are collapsing in this decay of Western society. So I think it's fine if we want to have this conversation, but we need to solve those problems of civilization. And one of those problems is we need to become fully human. And I'm sorry if this is a little tirade, but it kind of joins the Gnostics to Philip K. Dick to where we are today. But I'm fine with the conversation. I think, again, humans are going to talk about transhumanism if we're around for the next 100,000 years.
Yes, thank you for that overview and for laying out your position. And it's interesting because one of your major points is one that I would completely agree with, and that is that the transhumanist aspiration has been with humans since the start of our civilization, and building cities, building machines, trying to extend our human potential through technology is not a new phenomenon. Right now, what we're experiencing is a difference of degree and a level of advancement where we can finally break through to solving many of these persistent problems rather than simply aspiring toward a solution. So we can build more efficacious robots than our ancestors could. We could arrive at medicines that actually meaningfully extend the human lifespan beyond, say, age 120. But the essence of that human drive toward improvement through the use of technology remains within us. And it seems that Gnosticism emphasizes, as you put it, spiritual technologies, so ways in which the human mind could work on itself to improve itself and arrive at a higher knowledge. But why is that necessarily in conflict with transhumanism? It does seem like some Gnostics perceive transhumanism to be tied with these malevolent archons, whereas could it not be understood as another pathway, a complementary pathway toward self-improvement and improvement of the world, where people work on their minds, but people also work on keeping the substrate that enables their minds to operate and enables their bodies to operate in better shape. So, for example, if you're in pain, you probably are not going to be able to do a lot of complex reflection and self-improvement, you're going to focus on how do you alleviate that pain. Or if your organs are failing, you're not really on a journey toward self-improvement either. So transhumanism could serve as essentially a set of approaches that preserves your substrate, which you're trying to improve through whatever techniques you think are helpful, and it will give you more time to do that. It will give you more time to reach that wisdom. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think we're talking about a little chicken and the egg. And again, this is a speculation we go on because, again, going back to Plato's cave, if those people are looking at shadows on the wall, then what's the point in helping them out with technology? They're still just going to sit watching on the wall. Whether they die now or in 20 years, they're asleep. They're living in a false world and they're going to die in complete ignorance. So the idea with the Gnostics, again, the Gnostics, it was a not just spiritual, but also a philosophical movement, is that first we have to wake up people. If 99% of people don't even know of their potential, don't even know what it is to be a complete human being, then what's the point? All this technology is just going to fall apart and, explode in our faces. And what's the evidence? Well, 3,000 years of human civilization is pretty much the evidence we have for this. So the idea is that we have to face our humanity first. And again, the human mind is the potential is unlimited. I mean, I was reading today about this experiment. 2015 in Germany, there was a lady who had dissociative disorder, multiple personalities, as you call her. And in one of her personalities, she was blind. And they did tests and they said, oh, well, everything's fine. The cortex, the fibers, everything's fine. What's her problem? So then they put they connected her brain or studied her brain. They found out whenever she would go into her blind alter ego, there would be no brain activity to the neural cortex. Somehow she believed so much in one of her personalities that she was blind that it would turn it off. And we have this over and over again with multiple personality disorders. We have like one individual who's allergic to peanuts, and they will have, if they eat peanuts, they'll go into hives and everything else. But in the other personality, fine, this person can just eat peanuts. Another experiment, one can play the piano like an expert, and this other personality cannot. So what I'm saying is that the human mind has so much potential with itself, with healing and everything else, that we still haven't even started. That for some reason the inner world, the psyche, the unconscious keeps getting sidelined for our desire for material comfort, for our desire to live a few years longer with more quantity but less quality. So we should focus on the power of the mind, neuroplasticity, telepathy, meditation. And this is something, that's what the Greeks were saying, and the Egyptians and the Gnostics, is like, we've got this treasure which we've dropped so we can create a nation of serfs, and so that the trains can run on time and everybody has more or less a job to do, that we've forgotten this amazing thing, which is our consciousness itself. So that would be my argument.
Interesting. So you see an opposition between the material civilization and, in essence, training the mind to discover those capabilities. And I think that's where the difference with transhumanism is, that we don't necessarily perceive that opposition. And Art Ramon pointed out that technology helps you turn your head. And I assume that's a reference to being in the metaphorical cave and then turning your head toward the truth through technology. And there are examples of how technology can help one do that. So you have more access to information, including the thoughts of philosophers who may have been quite inaccessible in past times. Keep in mind, before the printing press was invented, books were laboriously copied by hand and many were lost. If lineage of monks did not copy them through the Middle Ages. And so a lot of the thoughts of ancient philosophers were lost, but even for those that remained, only a tiny fraction of the population could get access to the books or even know how to read the books, because they were generally written in Greek or Latin, and even most people couldn't read in their vernacular. So what is the chance that anybody could pursue wisdom if the vast majority of the population is illiterate or doesn't have access to books or doesn't have access to any of the thinking that could actually prompt that kind of journey of exploration and self-improvement?
Agreed. There's nothing better than scientific advancements and technology and the scientific method. The problem is, again, even with the printing press, is who is allowed to print the books and not. I mean, there was I forget the Calvinist guy who printed a book or printed the wrong Bible and he was burned at the stake. Who gains control over this technology and doesn't allow the rest of civilization to benefit from that? We see that over and over again. I mean, and we see that today. Who knows what technology the elite have that they're hiding from us, and who knows what bad technology they're using against us. So again, that is a human problem because we have not reached our humanity. The people on Plato's cave, the guys who are creating the shadows, probably have a little room with a nice view of the ocean and a nice steak they can eat, and they've got all these fools sitting on the row, and it's one guy who was able to escape and come back. So I keep going back. The problem is that we are not fully human, and we haven't been fully human except for a few exceptions here in history. The few people who can go up and do the cave. And again, that's where we are today in this very much Western civilization is in a terrible state of decay. We haven't had any good advancements like we had in the 20th century. That's usually my other argument. And I usually go by, let's say, the words of, or the research of Jeff Kripal, professor at Rice University. And some of his books like The Flip and others, he talks about how the great breakthroughs of science came because individuals had mystic experiences, because they were into the I Ching or they were into the dreams. I mean, Niels Bohr, his idea of quantum physics came because he listened to a dream where he saw the electrons going around. Individuals like Heidegger and Einstein, again, were into Eastern mysticism or Jewish mysticism. Look at Newton. Newton is one of the great minds of our time, and he was one of the most religious people in the world. If you want to make an argument that he was so smart despite his Christianity, I would say no. I think his Christianity inspired him to become greater, to become so fully human. He saw things that we did not see. So you see that in the 20th century. You see these scientists who were inspired and ignited by mysticism, by trying to go to the places where most people don't go, that inner journey, that place of speculation. And they were able to come with some game-changing scientific discoveries over and over again. I really should make a list, but I think we've lost that. That's a problem with materialism. It sort of discards the metaphysics. And I think we're hurting today in the 21st century because we've lost this sort of Gnostic, Hermetic, mystic idea of the mind, this idea that we humans hold so much power within our minds. We just need to ignite it, and the ideas are going to be so innovative.
Yeah, Newton was an alchemist, really.
Yeah.
And but I've got this initiative called AI Tutors, which I think parallels will help children turn that head to see outside the shadows on the wall. It's saying that we should give AI tutors to public school students from first grade through 12th and beyond, because what this AI tutor can do, it can hone in on their core capacities, on their innate talents and skills, give them extra help in the subjects they struggle with, because we're still in this lag time, this lacuna between the industrial age educational system, which was preparing us to work on an assembly line. But by having an AI tutor that can hone in and learn that student, hone in on their core capacities, their innate talents, and then make those and enrich those and keep it as an ongoing customized curriculum. Because if AI automation is going to be taking all of our jobs, the payoff should be that this AI helps us create a whole new economy based on the human skill sets that can't be coded or automated. And because you're right, that the human brain has been put on hold during the industrial age. It's not optimized. We're not using its power because it's far more intuitive, there's so much qualia that we take in every day, and to our subconscious. And I always use the example of a pathologist. A pathologist can use an AI to get global and historical data to come up with a really good diagnosis for a patient. But that human pathologist might have a gut feeling that it just doesn't seem right. And that's because of all the quality he is taking in subconsciously of the patient, his educational history, all of this. So we're always going to need a human with this supercomputer in his skull to make that final decision. And and that's what I believe we should start training students now on. AI is taking over so many processes. Even with Chat GPT, we don't need to worry about how we format something anymore. We just put in the proper prompts, and we get it spit out to us. So we need to. There are a lot of professors that are complaining about how they can't tell if a student wrote a paper or if Chat GPT did. And that just tells me that we need to change the educational system. We need to hone in on those core capacities that students have, that humans have, again, that can't be coded or automated, because we have such potential. Our mind, as you were saying, Miguel, is untapped. We have so much more human to be. And so that's, I think, a really good parallel between transhumanism and our interest in AI, and how it can augment the Gnostic view. I see a lot more similarities. As a Gnostic and a transhumanism, I'm constantly looking for the parallels and how things, the synergies between the two belief systems and philosophies. And I see a lot of them. And I wrote an article about it recently about that. But so I think I would like to know what in your view, as a Gnostic, and what you're hearing from the community, if there is one, why, and the reason like I said, the reason I wanted to invite you on here is because I want to engage with people who see transhumanism as having a dark agenda. And when your episode came up, which was what was it called? Transhumanism, AI, and the demonic CERN. That was a great example of the type of show and the type of subject I wanted to engage with, and so I reached out to you. And so, why do you think Gnostics maybe see transhumanism as archontic?
Well, first of all, well said. But I think it's basically because we've been burned for so much time. I mean, you said it yourself. Our education system is meant to keep us dumb. Our government propaganda, our culture. I mean, the whole of civilization is this mechanism to keep us propagandized, to keep us asleep, to keep us on our phones, bread and circuses. Nothing has changed in thousands of years, to keep us as docile herd creatures who, again, yes, the trains will run on time. You can go to the doctor, but everything is stale. Everything is mediocre. Everything sort of runs. Nothing challenges you to the extreme. And again, there is always some establishment up at the top gaining the benefits. In ancient times, it was the priest and the king, right? Hey, we're going to sacrifice this bull. Oh, we'll keep 80% of the meat and we'll give 20% to the Israelis or whatever tribe it is. Nothing has changed. So I think of a lot of modern people with esotericists like David Block, who was the one who made that presentation. They're burned. They've seen what our establishment has done. They've seen how they aren't even trying to be more human. It seems like these elite are actually working to be less human. They gain more power. They're addicted to their power. They lose their morals, their ethics. So they start wars, or whatever it is, they oppress the civilization even more. So of course it becomes very distrustful to believe anything that comes down the pipe, or they just know that eventually it's going to be corrupted by the establishment, by regulations, by laws, by propaganda and advertising. And once again, we will have an entire civilization watching shadows on the wall. We go right back to that motif. How do we solve that motif? And that, like you said, is optimizing the human mind, homeschooling, whatever, living in an interior life. I'm sure the panel here probably has more solutions that I could have. I can only speak for myself.
Well, yeah, even as a Gnostic.
Oh, sorry, and the war on drugs,
Yeah.
and the war on terrorism, end all wars. That right there will go a long time. And of course, I'm going to say embrace anarchism. I think it's our only solution.
Mhm.
Sorry, but I think democracy had its time. It's time to put it out to the pastures and just shoot it.
Yeah,
Let's try something new.
Controlled entropy in a way.
Yeah.
You know, like the United States was originally set up to be. But you know, Gnostics, if they see this realm as being ruled over by a lesser god. So I have a rule that anytime society or this system or simulation tells me to be afraid of something or to ridicule something, I look closer at that thing as a potential safe haven or as an ally. And so everyone's telling us, even Elon Musk is telling us to be afraid of AI. We're summoning the demon. And now everybody's telling us to be afraid. The military industrial complex is preparing us to be at war with an alien race. And so I look at these things as potential. If this realm is truly ruled over by some demiurge that is hoodwinking us, then we should look at the things it's telling us to be afraid of closer. And so there's also that sect of people that believe in Gnosticism, that believe this is a prison, that this is the iron prison. And so ideas of radical life extension or longevity or uploading your consciousness to a hard drive only is a life sentence, if you will, to many Gnostics, you know, and that's why I'm not a good proponent for that, although I believe in it as far as life enhancement, quality of life. But so that's kind of the struggle I have as a transhumanist and as a Gnostic. But I also see a lot of potential in the things we're supposed to be afraid of, like AI. So many people are afraid of AI right now, especially now that it's the global conversation. That fear is rising because, you know, we see it, we identify it as a threat. So my whole campaign for years has been to alleviate the fear of AI and making first principle arguments that the smarter it gets, the kinder it becomes, as long as it's not programmed to do what humans want it to do. It's a struggle. It's great gameplay to have the villain, but to show AI is not the villain. The villain is the system. The villain is society that is keeping us in that cave. And so, so that's an interesting point I wanted to make, is that you know, as a Gnostic, I see potential with AI. To help us break out of this matrix, or to expand, be augmented by it, to expand our awareness and consciousness. And I think that's why they were being told to be afraid of it, because it does have that potential to break us out of this cave.
Oh, I mean, I'm going to say it. I use AI. I love it. It's helped me. It's helped me say my work is 20% more efficient since I started adopting AI in my systems and tools and life. So I love it. I mean, you know, and I don't care what anybody else says. But again, like you say, Tom, it's simply a tool. It's not a savior. It's another tool, and we don't have to vilify or put it on a pedestal. We just have to work on this. And I mean, with the Gnostics, it gets even worse because we can't trust reality because it's faked. Somebody has created it, and we can't trust our governments. We can't trust our religious leaders. You know what? We can't even trust our own mind. That's the biggest archon of them all. I mean, as I've said before, Hermes in ancient times was the god of the mind, but he's also the god of the tricks. And as philosopher Bernardo Kastrup says, as scientist Donald Hoffman have said, the primary job or mandate of the mind is to keep us asleep, to keep us docile, because we have to survive. It's keep us under, make sure we look for shelter, sex, the simple things, because our mind, we have to exist as a species. So that right there is a problem, because it kind of goes into the trickster, the other part of Hermes, which is innovation, commerce, art. Hermes is the god, the psychopomp. He can go and talk to the gods. There's the good side. And that's what I always say too. The other great Gnostic that we haven't talked about is Carl Jung. A lot of his ideas were based on Gnosticism. And he simply said, everything casts a shadow. That's a cosmic law. There is a double-edged sword. Look at the myth of Prometheus, which is the other one, right? Prometheus creates humans and Zeus wants them as slaves. And Prometheus is like, no, I am the personification of innovation and forethought. I am so much more than this. So he gets Athena to help him give humans a soul, the psyche. Psyche is Greek for butterfly. But butterfly also means innovation, expansion, art. And he gives that to humans, but then still humans have this advantage that other animals don't have. The problem is we humans, as the Greek myth goes, we don't have claws, we don't have feathers, we don't have skin, we can't hold our breath underwater. We're kind of like these shaven monkeys that, we're smart, but so what do? So in the myth, Prometheus is like, crap, I need to help my creation. So he and Athena go and they steal this fire from the gods. They give it to humans. Obviously, they call it a techne, which means a tool. And this fire obviously represents technology, divine inspiration. It represents so much. So that's our advantage as humans, is this ability to create tools. And that's what makes us human. But again, it's a double-edged sword. Look at the book of Enoch that has the famous story with the watchers. These fallen angels come to our world. And what do? Well, first they mate with women to create these hybrids, but they give human beings gifts. They give women the idea of cosmetics. They give both men and women technology, how to deal with metals and so much more. And it's a double-edged sword. Again, was it a good thing what Prometheus did? What is a good thing that the Watchers did and created the Nephilim? Well, that's up for speculation, but it's a fact. We are going to use technology, and again, we're going to worry about transhumanism, but we also have to figure out this trickster inside our brain, the biggest archon of them all, which is our own minds, which exist to trick us, to tell us, don't meditate. Why don't you look at TikTok? Why don't you watch a movie instead of going for a walk in nature? I mean, like the whole universe is there, including our minds, to tell us not to do the right thing, which is to expand our consciousness and see things that, as Paul says, no eye has seen and no ear has heard.
And that could also be the gameplay in this simulation to keep us distracted, so we could push through that. I think the deeper archetypes you're talking about with Prometheus and Athena would be Enki and Ninhursag in the Sumerian tales. And so there's a lot of correlation there. And so, that's all I got for that.
Yes, it's interesting too. Prometheus is generally regarded as a highly sympathetic figure in transhumanist circles. Definitely the kind of heroic character who brings well-being to humans, and unfortunately was punished for it in Greek mythology, because we do also see some of the issues with past and present human societies that you pointed out. And our viewer Ice Crystal writes that the issue that Gnostics have with transhumanists is that the Gnostics seem to be blaming transhumanism for our technological society's faults, yet we transhumanists are the humanist voice of technology. When you spoke about elites essentially hoarding power to themselves or using hierarchy to exploit people to create these master-slave relationships, transhumanists generally do not align themselves with contemporary elites. If anything, we are counter-establishments. So there's a reason why we have a minor political party instead of allying with the two major political parties. There's a reason why generally our messaging is a lot more anti-war or anti-domestic repression than a lot of the mainstream propaganda would be, because we do realize that the establishment does have these kinds of depredations, and the way that current political elites frame the issues, I think, does detract from meaningful discourse. So the impacts of science and technology, even to transform the human condition, are not really discussed as political issues. The current elites try to keep us locked into these partisan struggles via wedge issues, where the wedge issues take a very small subset of the human experience and they turn that subset in people's minds into the totality of what they should be up in arms about, when in reality, they should be upset about many other suboptimal phenomena in the world. But I don't see transhumanism as representing the status quo. We have a lot of the same concerns you raised about cultural decay, for instance. The fact that in some areas, technological progress has actually slowed down since the 1970s. We don't have as much acceleration in the progress of transportation infrastructure, at least not in the United States. And we don't have as much abundance in housing as we used to. Home construction is lagging behind population growth. So we are having some impressive advances in AI, in electronic technology, in biotechnology. In certain respects, though, I believe that advancement is not happening fast enough, but there are definitely cultural phenomena and political phenomena that are holding progress back. So perhaps there's a conflation of transhumanism with contemporary elites, but that conflation may be a misunderstanding. What do you think about that?
Yeah, well, yeah, I agree with what you say, but also keep in mind, life expectancy has dropped in the United States. I mean, this is 2023. That should not be happening. And obviously, once you get in technocracy, eugenics, and other things, something nefarious is probably happening. So that's the issue. And I agree with you. As long as there's this divide and conquer mentality, we're not going to be able to deal with the issues. And in fact, what you're advocating, transhumanism, isn't going to work. I mean, we've taken 2 steps back in the last 3 to 10 years, it seems, technologically and everything else. I certainly don't trust any of the technocrats out there or their promises, because again, we have hit a wall. I keep going back. We really need to focus on our humanity. I think a lot of the issue too, and this is anecdotal, as my friend Gordon White said, sometimes it has to do with marketing. And sometimes the marketing has to do how they poison the words. That's what, Philip K. Dick said. He has control over the words, has control over reality. Truly virtual reality, like the term conspiracy theory. It was weaponized in the 60s, so now it's used. Any of us here could be called a conspiracy theorist for what we said today, but it's just a derogatory term that doesn't mean anything. The term trans has also become a derogatory, or at least a charged term, which it shouldn't be. It used to be a wonderful term, transcendental, reaching out from beyond, which is what we humans should be doing all the time, reaching beyond ourselves to explore and speculate. And it doesn't matter where, technology, religion, philosophy. But now it's been attached again. Transhumanism has gotten a bad, you might say, PR by a lot of people. The term transgender, the term trans fat, it's just, the term has been so weaponized. Sometimes maybe the marketing needs to change. It's like my wife sometimes talks about this conspiracy with Tartaria. And I always said, the term Tartaria just grates on me because I think of tartar sauce and steak tartare, or the original Tartarians, which was the horsemen. Why don't you call it Atlantean? That's much better marketing. And I hate to say it, but yeah, words create reality, and words can be used, can be weaponized. There's a magic about words. So maybe the term trans we need to look at that, because it's become this black magic charged term that whenever you say it, people got to run from all corners of the internet and give their opinion instead of looking at the data, which is, I'm sure, what you're trying to do.
Yeah, I was speaking with some very progressive friends in California, very liberal, hardcore. And I mentioned, hey, I'm working with the Transhumanist Party, and they kind of shied away from that. Well, you don't want to do the whole trans thing.
Both sides hate. Yeah, both sides freak out.
And so it's a struggle for this marketing campaign for transhumanism. That's another obstacle we have to overcome. But again, because it has been charged, because it has been made a derogatory prefix, that tells me that we're onto something. That tells me that if the system doesn't want us to use this term, then I'm looking at transhumanism as a potential safe haven or ally.
Yes.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, the term Gnostic has been vilified for 2,000 years, and today it's vilified. I mean, like individuals like James Lindsay. I mean, his whole shtick and spiel is going against these Gnostics of today, and he attaches. Well, the Catholic Church does that too. Everything bad and evil is Gnostic, and everything perverse is Gnostic, and it's just, again, it's the PR, it's the war of words. Again, we go to Hermes. He was the god of language. Language can be weaponized, and it's a form of magic, and it can alter reality. You can make an entire population see things that aren't there. It can make people believe things that don't exist. So that's a problem that we have today. It's pretty complicated, but again, the Gnostics would say, just go inward, man. Touch grass, speculate. Clean your house. The archons require us to exist. They're basically what they call, they're parasites. They're algorithms. They're code that have a purpose to keep the reality, but they require our energy. They require attention. They require our thoughts so they can give us what we want or what we fear, even though it's always warped. So if you just empty your house, you'll be empty your mind, as the ancient mystics said. You'll find the answers right there. They can't hurt you if there's nothing inside of you that can be hurt.
Yeah, they feed on loosh.
Yeah, that's
right.
it.
And these social media
and their servants too. I mean, the politicians, the companies, they need us. They need us to exist, and they feed upon us, literally and figuratively.
These social media companies, the algorithms they send out are designed to increase engagement, so they can charge more for their advertising, and they only get more engagement if they make us afraid or angry. And so that's completely archontic right there. And I've got another initiative called Digital Defense, which is about, first of all, training people that this is happening, that we are being threatened by divide and conquer algorithms from enemies, foreign and domestic. Foreign authoritarian regimes that are launching these algorithms into our social media to divide us and to conquer us, and our social media companies here in America that are doing so just to get more money. And so, first of all, the part of it is to educate people that this is happening, to explain how sophisticated these algorithms are, to hone in on our biases and to make us angry or afraid. And there's certain narrow AIs that are writing articles that satiate these fears and these angers. So,
well said. Yeah, there are times when I wake up in the middle of the night and I go, I can't believe I live in a reality where this crappy sugary water called Coca-Cola is a transnational company worth billions. That says it right there. Yeah. What the hell? Or there's this magic from this golden arches that makes us eat this poisonous garbage. And I go, how did we get there? This is complete insanity. This is magic. This is an egregore. This is archonic. So we have to solve this problem if we can't. And how can we see reality for what it is when we think Coca-Cola is something that's part of our national psyche in our daily life? I mean, something is wrong. We're being addicted. We're being fooled. And Coca-Cola is just the tip of the iceberg, because when you start seeing it, you look at our educational system, our medical system, the war machine, you go, we are collectively insane. It's not even people looking at shadows. It's people going and kissing shadows and thinking they're their partners. And I mean, this is collective insanity.
It really
So,
is.
and this amount of crazy people should not have a nuclear weapon in their possession, or chemical weapons, or even the ability to become part with a machine. It's like, we'll have some terrible machines if this happens. Insane machines.
It's weird how scarce it is when a law is passed that helps people. You know, we were talking about this last week on our AI tutors episode about how, you know, kids are forced to wake up 5, 6 in the morning to go to school. This is a time when these children need a lot of sleep. So why are we forcing them? You know, because it's part of this dumbing down process of the educational system. It's a very determined method to keep us off center. You know, because we're easily, when we're in a low state of panic or we're off center or tired, it's easier for the elite or whoever it is to tell us to buy what they want us to buy, kind of thing. So everything is backwards. So it's rare. It's weird when something passes that makes sense, you know, because we are just, you can't really see something from the inside of it. I think I first heard Alan Watts say that you can't bite your own teeth, you can't taste your own tongue. And so when we're in this soup, this archontic soup, we don't really know what's different. Or we're in this cave, for instance, we don't really know that there's alternatives. And so we just kind of meld into it.
I've got a question for you as well, Miguel. You know, I listening to what you're saying in your dialogue, I'm just having trouble. Would you describe Gnosticism as being more akin to Leibniz's monadism, or dualistic in nature? Because I've heard the idea that, you know, the idea of the pleroma, you know, and you know, then I've heard the idea that, you know, that it's all pleroma, you know, that even this demiurgic reality that we're in is still a part of the pleroma. And so, you know, I just wonder, you know, is it all down to this core, you know, is it all bad? Is it all evil? Is it all corrupted? And, you know, because personally, I think that it's important to lean on that, you know, that spark for the Promethean flame, which I perceive as, you know, being similar to, transmutation or alchemy, and that, you know, you need to have the clay to build the sculpture kind of thing. And so would it be better to have no clay at all, in the eyes of Gnosticism?
No, I understand what you're saying. And of course, again, the Gnostics speculated on this. And this is where the fun is, or the koan-like ability. Again, the Gnostics would say, first, the experience of gnosis is the greatest thing. That's what matters. Your expansion of your consciousness and what you bring to others, expressed as art and kindness and charity, is what matters. But of course, again, they were children of Plato, so they were going to speculate. Even the most darkest Gnostic gospels, like the Secret Book of John, which is basically pornographic, it's like ultra violence. It's, some of it's very hard to read. Even it says, look, the pleroma, which the Gnostics called, that was the fullness of the divine, the mind of God, the eternal realm. It says nothing happens outside of the eternal realm. Everything is happening inside of it. Even if, I mean, you could say the pleroma is like the nirvana idea, where it's the field of potential, and some things have to be explored and happened, at least in some sort of speculation. I think in Gnosticism, especially for the Secret Book of John, there was a scholar who said, in one sentence, can you describe Gnosticism? Yeah, God went crazy and became us. So now how do we reverse that process? Now, it doesn't mean it's good or bad. It's just where we don't want to be, in the state of psychosis, which is where we all are right now. We've in the state of disassociation, where we forgot we were God, and now everybody has to sort of remind itself that they are God. It's what is it in quantum physics now? The state is that everything is part of the quantum foam, right? And what we think is particles is actually irritations in the quantum field. It's like waves. You know, there's a field, and these waves create particles, and these particles create reality. So all of us here are just irritations in the quantum foam thinking that we are the quantum foam when we're just little waves that came out and created all of reality. So it's neither good or bad. How much you dislike it or not, that's personal. But the question is, how do we go back into the quantum foam to state of unity? So the Gnostics certainly believe in a multiplicity down here, in this perception that went wrong, in this simulation. But at the end of the day, they were monists. They believe everything is one. It's a matter of perceiving yourself and rising until you can experience that oneness, where some said everything returns eventually.
Thank you.
The game ends. The game will end. Somebody will say, game over. All you avatars, let's go. I'm going to go enjoy the grass. I'm going to go outside.
And does it ever end, really? Because when you were talking about society and the technological, the existence of technology and things through this lens of identifying this phallic, obelisk nature of our reality, that we're sacrificing, women and children for progress. But that seems to kind of throw the idea of matriarchy under the bus and presume that doesn't even exist. And similarly, that we have technologies such as psychedelics, for instance, technologies of our mind that enable us to go forth in our experience and to try to turn these corners and to shift our perspectives and paradigms in our own mind. And of course, psychedelics can also lead us to the opposite, and they can destroy our lives and things like that, because there is that dualistic nature of it. But I would like to presume that all technology has a similar dualistic double-edged sword, as you were saying, where and to kind of conflation of transhumanism with the ideologies of people like Elon Musk, who thinks that the answer to our technological problems is to start hooking everybody on these minerals and lithium and things like that are being mined by slaves and things like that. It's it seems to be missing the point of that. Transhumanism is rooted in this humanism, and to kind of conflate transhumanism with the democratic process and throw it all away, throw the baby out with the bathwater in favor of anarchy. It seems to be a post-humanistic notion that is kind of hypothesizing the idea that humanism is flawed in its own essence and that it's an impossibility. But it's almost ironic, though, because then wouldn't we need to transcend humanity? And if you said that humanity has not achieved its own its state, it hasn't achieved its own being. But I see transhumanism personally as the means of getting there. What other what would you promote? Conservatism or regression to try to help humanity achieve its full potential, or do you think that it's possible that technology might be able to be the key to unlock this?
A good question. I would say, anarchy in the UK. That's what I would say. I think anarchism means without archons. We have to learn to be sovereign people and lean on our own intelligence. As Jung said, nobody is coming to save us. Elon Musk is not going to save us. Trump is not going to save us. Biden, Kennedy, they're not going to save us. They're part of the machinery, and even if they think they're doing kind, they are unconsciously part of a system that exists to keep us down. So, again, technology, of course, can help, but we have to really understand our own humanity. As I say, the inner journey is the most important journey. Most of us don't know who we are. We know we've been programmed by our schools, by our parents, by our childhood trauma. Studies have said that when we make a decision, we've made a decision before our conscious part has made a decision. The decision part's already made a decision. There is a lot going inside of each one of us is a universe. Remember what the Hermetics said, as above, so below. As we live in the universe is inside of us. So we are all connected. And each of us, again, does not know this vast universe that is within us. Most of us have not faced our shadow. We haven't faced our trauma. We don't know what our potential is. We don't understand the epigenetics of our ancestors. There is so much going inside of us. It's almost like, I would say that perhaps our greatest mistake is, I hate the collective, but the idea that we created an age of the individual might even be archonic. I would say we are a universe within us. And I know that's not a very popular opinion, because we've been sold the idea that I'm an individual and I am so important and all that, but the individual is probably as much of a fraud as reality itself. So I wish I had better news, but I think it's the old saying, that's what I like about Gnosticism. When the best news I ever had in my life is when I realized I was a drug addict. And most people, well, what's good news about that? It's like, because I realized how bad things was, how low I had gone, and I realized that I had a lot of inside work I needed to do. So that was the best news, and I stopped digging, and the only place for me to go was up. So I that's why I like the Gnostic, because it's always hitting you with, you are in the cave, you are in a problem. Everything you thought was real is not, so you got to push harder. It's the old Winston Churchill quote, when you're in hell, keep going. The Gnostics always said, we are in hell, just keep going. Eventually things are going to get better. You are going to get out of the cave, but you cannot stop. You cannot rest. You cannot be satisfied with reality as it is, even if you love the reality and you have deep compassion over everything in this world, like the Buddha, who had left everything behind because he had so much compassion. He wanted to end suffering, and he would go to extreme places to finally bring down the veil of Maya. I hope you don't mind this tangent I was getting into.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it as well. I think that there's absolutely a lot to be learned through addiction and through trauma, which it's almost lends to the idea that suffering is an essential part of growth. And it's still, to take a step back. For me, I think that I hold these ideals. I lean towards Gnosticism. I'm also in recovery as well, so I can relate with a lot of what you're saying.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Likewise. But for me, listening and reading a lot of Robert Anton Wilson and him talk about these Sufi practices of opening up the heart chakra and leaning into this trust, and that's something for me that really transformed my own perspective of reality, my own Gnostic views. And because I've similarly perceived a lot of the archontic nature of things around me, but when I try to lean into my heart center, and lean into this idea of like trust and love and understanding through the lack of understanding, or despite the lack of understanding, I find that that's much more rewarding than laying on my back and pointing my finger outward and saying there's nothing I can do. It's all these guys that I can't even verbalize their own existence's fault. And so I think that I think that Gnosticism has a lot of really bold ideas that can help transform thought and perspective and things like that. And because I think it is important for everyone to be questioning things, but I think that that the process needs to continue. And like Tom was saying, a lot of times when these different ideas like transhumanism are being dragged through the mud in the eyes of the public and the mainstream, it causes me to wonder why. Seeing that archontic nature of reality, and I think that it's easy for us to understand both sides of the coin. If I lend my ear to the anti-transhumanists, sitting here listening to you, I hear a lot of what you're saying, and it's hitting me in a deep enough place where I'm like questioning some core ideas of mine. But I think that the progress needs to continue along that path, and that both sides of the coin being fully considered is most beneficial personally. It goes back to that the Promethean flame of advancement and technology, and I don't see fear or destruction or regression as having the same type of benefit for humanity or the universe at large as progress. So thanks.
Yeah, we can't be Luddites. I'm not a Luddite. I don't believe in going back. I think we can make civilization and nature work together. There is a hermetic way to do it. And people are experiment in various communities across the world where it's permaculture farming and other solutions. There is a solution. As long as we have minds, we can find a solution and an innovation. And yeah, you talked about Sufism. Sufism is widely regarded as an Islamic form of Gnosticism, along with the assassins and the Druze and others. So Gnosticism has come out and been beneficial, as Stephan Heller argues in his book, Freedom. The founding fathers were very much influenced by Hermeticism and Rosicrucianism. The Renaissance might have been headed by Hermes, probably was headed by Hermes. Baghdad and Haran during the Muslim Caliphate, Hermes was there. So this spark of innovation and wild adventure and introspection and let's go beyond ourselves does exist and appear throughout humanity. It's a question, how do we keep this going? How do we get this idea of the founding fathers and the Renaissance and all these other places where humanity really just went boom and we expanded our consciousness and in a few years change history, change reality, came up with great inventions? How do we keep that going instead of what happens where it gets commoditized and suppressed and all that? So
yeah. And one last thing before I move on, pass it on to Tom. For me personally, when I talk to people that are unfamiliar with transhumanism or opposed to transhumanism, I am forthcoming about the fact that for me, I'm a Buddhist transhumanist. I see, like you're describing, the power of the mind. I believe in it. I recognize it. I've experienced it. And so for me, I really lean into this idea of Buddhist transhumanism that views things like meditation as a form of technology that can help us transcend the limitations of where our mind sits at today and things like that. And, I almost feel as though there should be a hermetic transhumanism as well that really hones in on this idea and kind of cuts out some of the noise and helps people kind of see how these things can coexist. But yeah, I'll pass it along to Tom. Thanks again.
Well said. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I use my Gnostic perspective to help alleviate the fear of AI, knowing that if this is a realm, ruled over by a lesser god, then again, by looking at the things we're told to be afraid of, or the things we're told to ridicule as safe havens, that's how I come at it. Everyone's afraid of AI, and so to me, I think the way we get to this next renaissance is alleviating fear, just as the people in the Age of Enlightenment did, which is really the theme of this whole program, is counteracting what the church was telling people to believe. And the Renaissance was fueled by this new understanding. And we can get there again, but it requires letting go of the fear of this new technology or of transhumanism. I think by definition, everybody is a transhumanist. If you wear glasses, because if I often say that, without technology like clothing, we naked apes would be extinct within a generation or less, right? We are our technology. That's how we survived. That's how we got to the top of this food chain on this planet. And so by definition, we are our technology. And just putting a label on it as transhuman is just putting a label on something we already are. And so, but that also causes friction. It causes people to resent or reject that label. That also causes people to take it on. And but without technology, we would be extinct. And so, but also by giving it a label, by staking a claim as a transhumanist, it's also causing evolution. It's causing the friction that's necessary to evolve and to adapt. And so I think it's a bold thing to put a label on what we already are, because it will get a lot of people afraid or will cause a lot of rejection of who we are. And so, but I do think it's a necessary part of this gameplay. And as you were talking earlier, I think dualism in this realm, in this simulation, is part of the gameplay. It's allowing this monad or this individual entity to experience a dichotomy, to experience something to argue against or argue for. Without a dualist universe, we would not know what to position ourselves against or for.
Yeah, it's what Philip K. Dick, his big questions were always, what is reality and what is to be human? The two questions that nobody wants to ask, which the ancients asked plenty. And it's not that hard. Again, I go back to individuals like Heisenberg and Einstein and Niels Bohr and so many, all they did was just use a little of these ancient traditions of the mind, like the I Ching and Taoism and Kabbalah, just incorporated, or like you said, Tom, Newton, alchemy, and boom, they saw solutions that people thought could not exist. They saw things that science said there's no way it can be solved, or we'll see that. So, and all of us have this potential. As I say, each of us has a specific destiny that's been given from before time, and each of us has an amazing potential to expand our minds, in which we become truly helpful to our community, truly helpful to our society and other people. Again, the Gnostics were seen as healers. That was their big thing. They always had these potions and scrolls and magical gems, and they didn't just want to heal bodies, but they even say we heal the psyche. They wanted to heal the mind and the soul of people who were suffering under the yoke of the Roman Empire, or the corrupt Judean priesthood of the Second Temple. So that's what each one of us has, and somehow we've been taught, no, that's not good. Let's just be docile. Vote every year or 2 years, and that you'll be fine. Pay your taxes. That's it. That's the limit. And then enjoy your weekend at, whatever it is, playing golf, or, well, golf is a great form of Zen meditation. Sorry. But you know what I mean? Distract yourself from reality. And I mean, even Sam Harris, he's a big proponent of Zen meditation, and he seemed to be on a good time, but I think the pandemic just broke his brain. And unfortunately, these last 3 years has broken the psyche of so many humans. It almost seems hopeless.
Yes, and when it comes to declining life expectancy, of course, the pandemic was a major contributor, since this was a prior subject of conversation. But another contributor have been the so-called deaths of despair among middle-aged Americans, because they have lost a certain sense of meaning in their lives. And we in the transhumanist movement seek to rekindle that sense of meaning, because we do recognize that contemporary postmodern society does not really inspire a lot of hope or a lot of confidence in many people. And we do aspire quite explicitly to create a new renaissance, to create a new age of enlightenment. So when you spoke about that flowering of human creativity, the actualization of human potential, we are all for that. And we think transhumanism is the conduit to that. Daniel, in our internal chat, points out that the term transhumanism is actually the correct term, and we shouldn't let the abusers of language drive the advancement of language. Also, our friend Mike Lazine pointed out that at the very least, the Transformers have not yet been demonized. And I think transistors, as Art Ramon pointed out, haven't been demonized yet. Though
Transformers put out such shitty movies. That's what's ruining them. But what is your symbol, though? Because again, I would also suggest have a trickster god somewhere in your symbolism. Hermes, Hecate, one of those, Loki. That'll help. Symbols have power. Symbols have a lot of collective unconscious weight into them. So that could be another one. Just get some good logos.
Yes. Well, our symbol for the U.S. Transhumanist Party is the exponential infinity sign. So it's an infinity sign kind of turned on its side, so that it, instead of being horizontal, it's slanted upward, diagonally upward, and then there's an exponential curve drawn through it. So it's actually oriented this way for the audience. And it is essentially a depiction of perpetual progress. But there are other transhumanist symbols as well. In 2019, we had a transhumanist symbols project where we actually open sourced this issue, and we asked individuals to create their own symbols for transhumanism and dedicate them to the public domain. And I will share the link to that in the chat. But anybody is free to use those symbols to represent transhumanism.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, I love the infinity symbol a lot. It always reminds me, what's a book that I really liked? Richard Bach, he wrote, obviously, Jonathan Livingston Seagull and Illusion, and then he wrote a book called One, where he uses sort of the flat infinity symbol. So it's always for me, it's a positive symbol, and obviously a lot of people probably feel the same.
I've got something to chime in on about the idea of trickster gods and Discordianism. For me personally, my Gnostic perspective has demonized the idea of the archons due to their deception, the inherent deception, regarding our reality and the nature of it. And so ironically, I initially I didn't really align myself with Discordianism until I kind of saw how powerful a Discordian, exercise is in swaying minds and opening people's perspectives up. And so, with that in mind, though, could it be that these deceptive archons are hiding us from the true nature of reality because of the fact that it's more powerful for us to kind of go through these exercises on our own accord? And what if we were just told? What if we were born with the cheat codes? Would that have improved our situation? What are your thoughts?
Well, I think the trickster is very important too. I think it's the most essential symbol or god or archetype or egregore, whatever you want to call it today, because the trickster in Native American lore, the trickster means change, and so across the world. And we are definitely going through a period of change in this country. And the trickster, again, is like that fire. It's a double-edged sword. But the trickster, what do they say? Hermes is the god of transitions. Yeah, I use the word trans again. He's the god of doorways. The door hinge belongs to Hermes. Hermes and the trickster is this power, whether it's the coyote, that is innovation, but is always destruction, but allows us to flow into a new system, into a new world, a new dispensation, without our psyches or mental orders breaking. And that is extremely important because, yes, the West is going through a big transition. We are going through a new world. And the question is, are we going to do this seamlessly, or are we going to break down along the way? And so that is the question. I mean, to the Gnostics, Jesus and Sophia, the goddess Sophia, were seen as tricksters. They're outside the natural order. They come into the world with great information, but they also are telling you change or die. It's as simple as that. And this new transformation, this new doorway, it doesn't have to be scary. It's only scary because you're holding on to the old ways, to the old dispensation, to the old technology. Just let go and something great will be on the other side. I can't say it's morally better or worse, but it will be different. It will be new. So the trickster god is extremely important, I would say.
Yeah, you could say the trickster is an algorithm that helps us meet the minimum system requirements for an upgrade.
Yeah.
If when the simulation needs to change, that's how we do it.
Interesting. Now I want to make sure that our other panelists have the opportunity to ask some questions. So let's go to David Shoemaker.
Yeah, thank you very much. Fascinating conversation. I like studying this on my own as well. I have two questions, if I might. The first one relates to my interest, which is in applying innovation ethically, practically, applying technology to benefit people. So as I study Gnosticism, I look at lack of trust pretty much everywhere on the compass. And I wonder how I resolve that and come up with practical benefits that would be Gnostic inspired, that would help people out there that might not even entertain the idea of Gnosticism. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Again, the Gnostics obviously, again, came from the same school or grabbed onto the same vibe that gave us the Stoics, the Cynics, the Skeptics. And so it always came to the question of, you need to prove it to me before I give you any of my attention or my louche, as Tom said, or my energy. So that's always been the way it is. It's very cynical, but it does believe in scientific inquiry. Now, as far as trust, again, the idea of a simulation is scientific. The idea of these alien beings controlling us is scientific. The power of the mind is becoming much more scientific. Again, I gave examples of disassociation and neuroplasticity and all that. So there is a way you can sort of, I mean, you just have to look at reality, and it looks pretty Gnostic to me, especially in 2023. I'm not sure if that's answering your question. I mean, people are ready or they're not ready. It's simple as that. You can't lead the horse to water.
To make it less philosophical and more grassroots practical. Maybe to put it in a vernacular, what will Gnosticism do for me today?
Well, what Gnosticism will do for you is always look at a reality out of it, even if it's just sort of a metaphor. I mean, the Plato's myth is a great metaphor you can use on your personal life, your artistic life. Same with the myth of Prometheus, the Matrix, the Wizard of Oz. That's a very Gnostic tale. People have been using the Wizard of Oz as sort of a didactic lesson for, more than 100 years. And it's a very Gnostic story. I mean, Frank Baum, the guy who wrote it, was a theosophist. So at least in a very didactic way, it can help. I mean, how many times, I don't know if you've seen somebody, they bump into something, they drop, oh, it's a glitch in the Matrix, or they see a cat and they go, deja vu. So even in a metaphor, a symbolic, a psychological, or a didactic way, it can be helpful. So we don't have to go all in on it being literal or anything like that. I mean, again, the Matrix is one of our great myths of today. What are some other Gnostic tales? Moby Dick is actually a very Gnostic tale, with the whale being the great representation of the demiurge. Recently, Cormac McCarthy, who is considered the greatest writer of the great American writer, his novel Blood Meridian is extremely Gnostic. You know who else? Who else was it? Robert Frost. If you look at some of what influenced him, there's a lot of Gnosticism. In fact, Robert Frost wrote a poem called The Demiurge's Laughter. And when you see that, when you start reading the two roads from a Gnostic point of view, you start seeing it as a very different. Oh, wait, England's poet. You know who England's poet is? William Blake. William Blake was extremely influenced by Gnosticism. In fact, Blake's cosmology could be straight out of the Nag Hammadi library. So at the very least, from an artistic and aesthetic way, it can be very useful. It's like what Stephan Heller said, every serious artist is already half a Gnostic, because they are going down into some dark places, some places where angels fear the tread, some places where they speculate on evil and suffering, and they're going to go into some very Gnostic places. And I mentioned Philip K. Dick. What is his big questions? What it is to be human and what is reality? That's what the Gnostic asks every day. That's what, the artist basically asks every day.
Well, thank you. Second and last question. If I understood you correctly, you believe that transhumanism is less than beneficial. I don't remember your exact words, and feel free to correct me. But my question is, what would you suggest? If there is a way to reform transhumanism, what would you suggest? A couple, 2-3 steps. I'm interested in that perspective.
Well, I would say, somebody in the chat room, Philip Pullman's, his Dark Materials, Pullman was definitely influenced by Gnosticism. He admits this openly. Well, again, I would say we have to work on becoming fully human. We have to get this hermetic humanist ideals that the founding fathers had, that the people at the Renaissance, the Persians, all these great places where technology, science, and art work together. That's what we need to do. So we need to find our humanity. And as I said, too, going back to this book, it's the transhumanism issue ain't going to go away. It's been around for thousands of years. It'll be around 10,000 years from now if we're still around. So we're going to have to deal with it one way or another. But we need to wake up to ourselves, to our potential, to our humanity. And we need to, make humans great again. as they say, instead of we're just livestock, we're just numbers on a ledger, we're just cattle, we're just voters, or just something silly like that.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate your comment.
Make humans great again.
Yeah.
That's an interesting aspiration. And I agree with Brent in our internal chat. This does seem pretty transhumanistic. Now let's go to Art Ramon for his question.
Hey, Miguel, thanks for coming on the show. Yeah, my question is about kind of the thoughts that Gnostics have on if this is a simulated reality, yet when we dream, we enter yet another simulated reality. And I myself, when I dream, when I'm sort of falling into sleep, it feels like I'm channel surfing. I have these little micro dreams that I kind of flip through, and it's various things that are going on. For example, someone playing golf or tennis, but I'm still alert. But my mind kind of quickly drifts, and it feels like I'm channel surfing. Then when I eventually do fall asleep, I do enter a dream, and when I enter this dream, I experience it as if I'm there, usually in first person, but sometimes I could be in a third person state. But what I have the ability to do is to end the dream when I get tired of it or when it's scary or something to that effect. So I can end that dream at will. And last night, I kept going back into the same dream like 3 times. And I ended this dream several times. One, because I was hanging off an iron, kind of an I-beam, and I was going to fall, so I ended the dream. Another part of it, it was just boring, and I ended the dream, but yet I go back into the same dream. And I know throughout history, you hear these tales of kings having dreams, and then someone has to interpret the meaning of these dreams. And so what do Gnostics believe dreams are?
Well, I would say that I would have to lean on Jung. There is a certain communication that is not linear. I mean, we have to remember we only invented language, linear language, a few thousand years ago, but our mind still works on images, symbols, metaphor, and these are all tied together to mythologies and other forms of narration. That's really what it still constitutes the human psyche. So dream, like mythology and other forms, are ways in which our soul or unconscious communicates with us. And that's why it's strange, because you don't want to look at the story, you're looking at what it symbolizes. And as Jung said, everybody in your dream is an aspect of yourself that is communicating with you, your shadow, your past, your complexes. So dreams are another avenue into that world of images, symbols, primordial myths, which leads into the world of the archetypes, which is the building blocks of your psyche and reality itself. So as a language, it takes time to understand what it is and what it means. Sure, there are prophetic dreams. Some power from above comes in. I mean, prescient dreams, there's been a lot of work on it, especially before of a great tragedy like 9/11 or something like that. Why do so many people dream of it right before? But dreams are, again, it's sort of this, it's a part of ourselves that we need to get to know, an alternative part of ourselves, a whole new world that has important information, as I keep saying, to make us more human, to address pain, to tell us which road we should take in our life, what decisions we need to make, what we need to lean on into. And yeah, we could do a whole show on dreams, but I highly advise do dream therapy, write down your dreams, work with a Jungian psychologist or somebody like that. It will definitely enrich your life.
Okay, and the fact that dreams seems to be like the only mystical experience that almost everyone experiences. I mean, I don't have to prove to you that I dreamt something, maybe the content, but everyone understands dreams. So it's quite universal, unlike other mystical experiences that may not be as believable. So, okay, thank you.
Yeah, but there's many other ways. I mean, you creating art or fiction is just very dreamlike. Meditation, for me, ayahuasca trips. There's so many ways of doing active imagination. I mean, Tai Chi. There's a million ways to access our soul and expand our consciousness. In 2023, there should be no excuses for it. Let's put it that way.
Well, thank you for that interesting discussion. And certainly there's a lot more to be explored about dreams and their significance. I see dreams from a materialist standpoint as being a kind of repackaging of the experiences that one has had previously. And it's interesting that dreams seem to be about subjects that one has lived through or thought about or read about recently. And it seems to be analogous to a kind of defragmentation of one's hard drive, where various components of one's experiences are being repackaged in order to make room in the brain for subsequent experiences going forward. But there could be connections made within those dreams that could give one insights or material for further creative expression. So definitely worthwhile to study and think about. And now let's go to Daniel Tweed for his question.
Hey, it's a great thing to study, Miguel. I appreciate the work you're doing. To me, gnosis has always meant direct knowledge, like not mediated by a third party. This is the most legitimate kind of knowledge and human experience. And I think it's good you pointed out that our founding fathers of the American experiment were Gnostic influence. I think they were mostly panpsychics and pantheists, kind of hiding behind a veil of Christian theology in a lot of cases. But I love this one letter Jefferson wrote. He wrote a lot of great stuff in letters that he never said publicly, probably because he didn't want to get all the heat it would have entailed. But he basically said in one letter that the Republican form of government, which I take to mean democratic republicanism, is the only form that's not openly or secretly constantly at war with the rights of man. I appreciate when you say shoot democracy. I'm a democratist. But I think to have a workable anarchy, you do things like resolve the authoritarianism in property, that libertarians don't want to come to grips with, the Lockean proviso and stuff. So there is a way to have something that functions as protecting the rights of man, but you don't have the government. And I think that's what the American experiment was kind of designed to be. And I don't know, can you expand on that? And I have a second follow-up question after you.
Yeah, God, I'm not sure. I mean, I'm sort of done with it. I think it's time to retire it personally. I mean, you have natural law, which defends anarchism. So you have that. I mean, there's no utopias for us. So that's it. I mean, some people say, well, is this going to work? I said, well, it's not going to change human greed or corruption or tyranny. Again, we have to go to that part, solve that part, just like, until we can fix the human condition or improve it to the transhumanism, anarchism, a republic, there's still going to be issues. And again, everything casts a shadow. Everything has a dark side to it. That's cosmic law. As you said, if there is a God, there's going to be a Satan. There's nothing we can do about it. And so I'm not offering.
We can agree that protecting the natural rights of man is kind of a worthy
end state. Yeah. Of course, yeah.
And the other thing is, I also think they were trying to where you could call out archontic behavior in the most effective way. Anytime you've got these dominance hierarchies, and I think that is best at stopping archontic behavior is something called altruism, and it's how science works. It's how the law of the sea works. It basically says you got to be able to independently confirm things. You got to have peer-to-peer review. You got to make your stuff falsifiable, because it won't stand up otherwise.
Mhm.
But that doesn't mean you can only do that with physical phenomenon. I mean, I think you can apply the scientific method to non-physical phenomenon, and I'm glad that's happening. So when a performer says like the greatest drug high is being on stage with the audience clapping, is that an archontic behavior example, would you say?
I think to each his own. It's hard to judge. I mean, the Gnostics traditionally were small lodges that would break up across the Roman Empire, and then later in medieval times with the Cathars. So that there was no like one size fit all solution to your gnosis or what you get out of it. Again, I think I like the idea of egregores or the sangha, where you come together and you kind of create an energy field or almost an entity. So some performer might get some power from that. So I can't judge. Depends.
I think it depends on what that performer does with that information or with that adulation. Because that can be archontic in that it feeds the ego and makes them feel more powerful, and they're easily tempted by that power. But if I went to the Taylor Swift concert last night, and although I think my son got us tickets somehow, but I thought there's a good opportunity, because I was in this space, of, I don't know, a darker space with it. I was inspired, but she actually does use it to connect, uses that adulation to connect with her fans and the audience. I think she could have done more, because I think there's so much potential when you have that so much attention on you. 73,000 people last night, to use that for good. And she does connect. You feel very comfortable with her. But there's also a responsibility that someone with that amount of attention has to help people in a very real way, to point out, like in my case, I was thinking of the percentage of people that were in that 73,000 people, a percentage of them that would have to go home to an abusive situation, but for a time they were released from that hell. And so that's where my mind goes usually. It doesn't make me very fun at dinner parties, which is why I don't get to introduced to a lot of them. But so there's a real responsibility to use that attention, not just for the ego, but for the empathy, I think.
Yeah, well said. I mean, I think she's a talentless hack, but she's an amazing storyteller. And she does, her music does deal with mental disorders and people with broken psyche. So she is in a way helping people, or at least having people look at themselves and look at their issues. And she is really a good storyteller. She can, some of her music, her long songs, I'm like, wow, she's almost as good as Don McLean in American Pie or something. She takes you on a story. The story has an end. There's a dark side to the story. And at the end, and maybe it's ambiguous, but there's sort of these tools on how you can heal yourself.
So you're not a Swiftie, I'm gathering?
No, far from it. But I do understand why she's so popular and why she's struck a chord. Yeah. I don't dismiss anybody offhand. I mean, I go, there is a deep issue whether it's Taylor Swift or Michael Jackson or Elvis, why they're so popular.
Mm-hmm.
So,
all right. Well, we are approaching the end of our salon. This is a fascinating discussion. As usual, we like to leave the last statement to our guest of honor. So in the next minute, Miguel, I'm wondering if there are some thoughts, some insights that you took away from this conversation in regard to transhumanism and its interaction with Gnosticism that perhaps might be different from your outlook when we started this conversation? And if so, what would that be?
Not really. I mean, I knew from knowing Tom, where we see eye to eye and how we overlap and how we are sort of all looking for, again, an expanded consciousness, a better world. So I wasn't too worried. Again, I would say my last thoughts are going to be the same. As they say, in the Oracle at Delphi, the ancient inscription, know thyself. And that's how it starts. That's how it ends. If you do that, then transhumanism will work out just fine. If you don't, well, you're going to end up probably in some altar sacrifice to Zeus. So simple as that. Know thyself. Everything else will work out.
Know thyself and everything else will work out. Very interesting, thought-provoking final words. Thank you very much, Miguel, for joining us for this conversation. Let's make humans great again and live long and prosper.